welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be talking about this light right here. This is the, I believe it's pronounced Cyansky. Not 100% sure, but that's what I'm going to go with. It's a K3-I8 model, and this is an IR only flashlight. And just to tell you now, if you don't want to watch the rest of this thing, the rest of this review, buy this now if you want a dedicated IR only flashlight. This thing is phenomenal. It's by far the best one I've used to date. Just so you guys can see all the technical data on there, there's the output. You got 5,000. That sounds like a lot compared to something like this Knockoff over here. This is not an actual Surefire M600V. This is like a knockoff of one that I found on eBay for like $70, $60, something like that. You can see the output on this one is 120 is what they actually have on there. And so whenever I saw that on this one, it was 5,000. I was like, well, that just can't be. It must just be marketing. No, it is substantially brighter than this knockoff right here in the IR mode. So there's the specs on that, and I'll show you some footage of here what it looks like under NVGs here in a little bit. So again, you got the rating. It's good for 5 hours. Now it will, and I'll show you this in a second, it does go down in brightness the longer it's running. It's good out to about 350 meters, and I believe that I tested it out to 100 on camera, and I took it out a little bit further just to see how far it would go, and it does actually go out. The farthest I could actually test it was, I think, 250 or 300 yards, and I could still see it. Same as if you've ever seen the video where I reviewed this Streamlight IR light. It has the same distance as this one, but it's actually a lot brighter, so I'll go over that here in a minute. There's the candela rating. I don't know necessarily if that directly corresponds IR versus white light. I'm not, well versed in that, but it's got a 2-meter drop rating and IPX8 waterproofing. So here on the back is some more data, so you can see how the brightness goes down the longer it works. And there is more information for you, the weight, the size, waterproofing, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to know that information, again, you can nerd out, pause the video, and you can read that stuff. First things first, it comes in a nice box, which it doesn't really mean anything to me, honestly. Like, whenever I get stuff like this, I throw the box away, so I don't really care. But it is reassuring whenever a company sends you something like this, which is, I would say, similar to like what Olight sends their stuff in versus something like this, a knockoff that just comes in a cardboard box. So that's nice. And again, I recorded all the footage you're going to see through these. This is a Sightmark Ghost Hunter 1X NVG. It's a Gen 1 night vision device, and it actually works pretty well as long as you have either full moon or some type of illumination. So now that all the specs are out of the way, I want to talk about what it comes with. Comes with this little nylon belt holder, which, I mean, I will probably never use, but it comes with that if you're interested. I would like to see some sort of Molly pouch that has Molly on the back instead of this. But, I mean, it is what it is. And make it like brown or green or something, or make an option. I don't know. Small complaint, but most people will probably never use this. So I would say include something that people are more likely to use. It comes with little extras. It comes with a little lanyard, which is cool. It comes with extra O-rings and an extra little rubber tail cap switch, which is a nice touch because if you're rough on your stuff, you're going to eventually wear out that rubber or break it. So it's nice that they include that for free. Comes with a little belt clip, which I take off because I'm using this as a rifle-mounted IR light, not a handheld. But the nice thing is, they also sell these little 45-degree offset QD mounts, which they did send this light out to me, so I should go ahead and preface with that. Full disclosure, they sent this light to me for free, didn't pay anything. So does that influence my review? Absolutely not. I don't care if someone sends me something, I'm still going to tell you what I think about it. So they sent off this 45-degree offset, and I requested this one specifically because that works best with my rifle setup. But I like that it comes with a QD mount because something like this, if you're going to put on your rifle, and it's not an IR white light combo like the actual Surefire on this one would be, so you have it off white light IR, then you are going to have to either, one, be okay with having 2 different flashlights on your gun along with a laser, or you're going to have a way to QD these at the same location to where you can switch between white light and IR light whenever it gets dark, which is not ideal because you might need a white light at some point. So I would advise just mounting them on your gun all the time and just accept the weight, because getting something like this is going to be substantially cheaper than going the route of getting, again, this Chinese knockoff. But if you've got a real Surefire, the Vampire model, they run $400, and you're going to have to get a tape switch, which is another $100, $150. So that is uber expensive versus you can get something like this for around 80 bucks. And again, that's just the light. So you could get something like this, which is, you know, around $80, and then also get yourself a white light for, you know, anywhere from $100 to $200 or get a very solid weapons light. And then for, you know, around 200 bucks or so, you have a really good IR and white light setup. And honestly, you're gonna have the benefit of, you know, something like this does not have the white lumen or the white illumination output that a dedicated white light would have. So having a dedicated white light, you know, you can get anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 lumens on a solid white light. Then you have this, which is infinitely brighter than, you know, a combo light as well. But just know it's gonna weigh more. But this one just feels like quality, and compared to something like the Streamlight IR light that I've reviewed before, this one actually feels cheaper than this one does. This is very solid and it's very compact. So I'm not going to take off the mounts on here, but one advantage, if you can see right away, is the size comparison. You can see how much smaller this thing is compared to the Streamlight. This thing is just obnoxiously big, and the bezel on the end is just huge, and then the body isn't actually one inch, so I had to wrap some Gorilla Tape around this one to get it to fit on one of these mounts. This one is actually a 1-inch flashlight, so it'll fit on all your standard 1-inch mounts, which is a really nice touch. Streamlight, you're behind the game on that one. When it comes to other accessories, they include, well, they don't include, but you can purchase separate from them. They do have tail switches for this. I don't remember how much this is. I want to say it's like 20 bucks. It's not expensive. You just unscrew the tail cap switch on this one, and you screw this one in, and then you can mount your tail switch on Picatinny rail right here. And you can see about how tall that sits up. It's a little bit taller than I would like. So that's one thing I would like to see, is this, you know, get a little bit lower to the ground. But what I will say is the fact that it's aluminum, it's much more solid than pretty much all the pressure pads that come with, like the Holosuns, Streamlights, all the ones that are kind of more your nicer quote unquote budget options. They usually come with kind of cheaper tape switches. They're basically just plastic. So having something that's metal, this feels much more durable than those other ones do, and most people replace those tape switches with something nicer. This one is going to be proprietary because it uses this tail switch. But let me attach this so you can see how it works. And before I put the tape switch on, this is the kind of battery it comes with, just so you know. It is a nice made battery from what I can tell, and it has a little micro USB port right there to charge it from. And this thing has a lot of output, so it just goes in there. It does not take CR123s as far as I know, but that's not really that big of a deal, to be completely honest. I don't worry that much about it not taking CR123s. You could just buy a couple extra batteries of these if you want to and charge them up. So the tail switch, you can see on here, it's got enough length where you can wrap it around whatever you want, and you won't be able to see, really, maybe you will. Yeah, you can see it light up on camera. Okay, so it's got a permanent on and off clicky tail switch. See right there, now it's on, I'm not touching anything, it's on, now it's off. Or you have momentary. You can see momentary. All right, and I will say it's a nice positive click on the momentary. I don't know if you can hear that. It's nice, and then the click is nice as well. So as a tape switch, works just fine. It's a little tall on a Picatinny rail mount. You can see about how tall it would stick up. Not that big of a deal. I would put it probably somewhere behind my front sight. But just know you can get a tape switch for this light specifically, this designed for it. Whether or not you want the tape switch is completely up to you and how you're going to attach it to your gun. Honestly, I would probably just leave the tail switch on here if you're going to run like a white light with the tail switch, just because I wouldn't want tons of switches just all over my gun, just because it takes up a lot of space. But if you got room on your gun, say you got a longer handguard, then yeah, throw a tape switch on there. You can put the white light pressure switch, you know, maybe at a 45-degree angle or on the side, wherever you wanted, but that is an option. So one thing also about the tape switch that I'll mention is, instead of this tail switch type attachment, I would like it if they could make some sort of tail cap that actually had this plug, like this one. This knockoff thing that I got also has, you can take off this end cap and put on a Surefire one. That'd be kind of cool if they could do something similar to where they just made that kind of plug back there. It might be something that's copyrighted or patented, I don't know. But if you could do that, that would be a nice touch, because then you could use pressure switches like this, or you could use pressure switches like the Unity Tactical, the taps, to where you could hook it in and use the IR light and the IR laser at the same time. And then if you wanted to, you could buy either, you know, something like this or just a Streamlight white light by itself. That's, you know, 1200, 1500 lumens, however bright they are. They're very bright lights. And then you could just unplug it from one, plug it into the other based on whatever situation you need. Obviously, that wouldn't be ideal, but that would be a very cheap way to do it. Again, the more you spend, the more capability you have, the more convenience you have. So it just depends on how much you're willing to spend. But that would be a way to make it where people could spend even less money and still have functionality out of the system. So I will go over these lights real quick just to show you, and I'll show you some footage of what this looks like under, again, this Gen 1 NVGs. And these are the lights I compared. So I compared this little IR light right here. This thing basically has very low output. It's really only good for up close, but I don't know if I'll insert footage or not, but it's really only good for like looking at your hands and what you're doing in the ground in front of you. It doesn't really do much more than that. I compared it to this Surefire copy. Again, this thing was only $70, but I used the IR light on this to show, and this is pretty much just a flood. I compared it to this Inforce light, which is a white light IR combo by just flipping that switch. And I will say this one performed about the same as this, except this has kind of a dead spot in the middle, which you'll see. And then I also compared it to this Streamlight. I don't remember the model, but it's the only IR light that they actually make that I'm aware of that's just a large enough light like this for larger distance. And beforehand, this was the one I was going to leave on my rifle or have it to where I could easily, again with this QD system, just clip it on whenever I wanted it and then take it off whenever I didn't want it because it's large. With this one, it is small enough to where you could leave it on your gun all the time. You're going to have weight on the end, sure. Get a lighter barrel, that'll save the weight right here because it doesn't weigh that much. Or you could do, you know, what I thought about doing initially and just having it where it's QD, take it on and off as you see fit. But here is the footage of what the comparisons look like for this light and all these other lights. So again, this is with the Streamlight IR light. It's a very, very intense like hotspot, and it's up close. It's way too bright, but at distance you can see it's okay. You'd be able to identify somebody, but it wouldn't illuminate really their entire body because it's such a tight beam. It would really illuminate just kind of, you know, like their torso or whatever. So if you're wanting to kind of see the entire area, this is not your light. All right, here's the Inforce light. You can see off, on, and it's full moon out tonight. So actually what you're seeing right now is about what you see through the NVGs through naked eye. But because I'm trying to record this through an iPhone, it's terrible. But this will give you a good representation of what it looks like. So you can see it's more of a flood. It is not a beam at all. This is more of a flood, kind of like that Surefire knockoff. It's good out to, you know, probably 50 yards with these Gen 1s. It might be a little bit better farther than that with Gen 2s and Gen 3s, but with the Gen 1s, it's good enough for indoor use and, you know, closer distances within 100 yards. And here is the cheap little $7 IR light. It actually works okay. It'd be good for, you know, walking through the woods or whatever, but this is on its highest intensity setting, or the most focused. So just to give you a comparison. Alright, so again, camera's trying to fog up. Hopefully this gives you a good comparison. You can see it's very bright and it gives you more situational awareness than that Streamlight does. So this is by far the winner, and this is again only about 30-40 yards, somewhere in there. Without, with, much better. And again, here is the Streamlight, just to show you. Much more hotspot. I'm assuming whenever I take this out to longer distances, this one might be a little bit better, but the other one is definitely better up close, but we'll see whenever I take it out. Alright, so there's my shed. To give you a comparison, that door, that shed is probably 10-12 foot tall, somewhere in there. So, and this is at roughly, I would say that's about 30 to 40 yards, somewhere in that range. So again, that gives you a good comparison
as to how much this lights things up. It's a pretty big pattern, but it's still very, very intense. Much better than all the other options that I currently have. Alright, and for comparison again, here is the Streamlight. You can see it's a tinier beam, so if you were trying to shine this on somebody, I mean, you would illuminate their torso, but you wouldn't be able to really see their head or their legs as well. And so this might be good for a really long range, but this is not good for anything up close. But again, this is the Streamlight, just to give you a comparison. Again, here is the Vampire, or the Surefire Vampire knockoff. You can see it's got that like dead spot in the middle. It does illuminate some in the middle. It's not just completely dead, but that's kind of obnoxious. If they change the little the mirror design on the inside of the bezel, or whatever you want to call it, it would make a difference. So this one's still good out to, you know, 30, 40, maybe 50 yards, but anything outside of that is probably not going to be that great. And again, here's the Inforce. Hey, there it goes. All right, so Inforce, you can see it's really a floodlight. You don't get anything specific with this thing. This light is really only good for about 40, 50 yards at the most.
So that footage was in my backyard, and you could see I shined it at my shed and kind of the wood line behind my house, which is probably, you know, anywhere from 25 to 35 yards away, depending on what you're looking at. So that's just kind of to show that. I will also insert footage here to where you can see what this light looks like out at farther ranges. And again, I only recorded out to, I think it was about 100 yards or so. I didn't record out further because I didn't have time to go out to where I wanted to show the distance. But just know, based on how this thing performs, which, spoiler alert, is significantly better than this thing, there's no reason to buy this light at all. And if you already bought this based on my recommendation, I'm sorry. This light outperforms it by a lot. That one is still adequate. I mean, it still works, but it has a lot of limitations because the beam is a lot narrower, versus this one has a much wider flood or spill to it, but it's still focused. And but just know, this light here is about, I would say, at least 2 to 3 times brighter than this light here, maybe 4 times brighter. It's substantially brighter, but also the spill on it is better. It still has a pretty good hotspot that will travel out to their distance of 350 meters, I believe, at 100%, because this one would do that, and this one is substantially weaker than this one. But the nice thing about it, sorry, I'll show you again. I'll show you the footage here in a second. But this one produces a very, very narrow beam that really, in my backyard, would light up, you know, about a torso. And then at 100 yards would light up, you know, a whole person. But that's all you're seeing, a very narrow field of view. And the spill behind it, you'll be able to see it on camera, but it's not really enough to see, you know, who would be next to that person or what's beside them. You'd only see the person. It reminds me a lot of like a PEC 15, like very focused, like the laser emitter that's for illumination. It's just a very small target versus, or a very small beam, versus on this thing lights up pretty much, I would say, like a 15-passenger van. Like at 100 yards, it will light up, you know, up and down, side to side. But it's the same intensity as this little tiny beam. But instead of just being a little tiny beam, you spread out that beam to the entire thing with the same intensity. That's what this is. So again, in case you can't tell, I'm very, 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 very impressed by this light. But without further ado, here's the footage of 100 yards. Hopefully it's clear enough to where you can see it relatively well.
Alright, so this is as good as it's going to get. So these trees out here are roughly probably about 30 yards away. The trees down there are about 100 all the way down. You can see all the way down that path. So this is the Streamlight IR light. You can see all the way down there. That's about 100 yards down to the very end of the trail down there. So you can see how narrow of a beam this is. It lights it up, but it's pretty narrow, pretty small beam. So you can kind of see what that looks like. Again, up close, you know, pretty hot spot. Shine it around so you can kind of see what it looks like. Shine at the trees. Still usable, obviously. Alright, here is this flashlight. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. You can see how much wider this beam is. Maybe it shows up on camera, maybe it doesn't. But you can see it's wider. There's 100 yards down there. It's definitely got a larger... Let's see if I can hold this. I'm trying to do this behind an iPhone, so sorry. You can see it's a bigger beam. You can see down there 100 yards, you can see pretty well. I like this one better, obviously, compared to the Streamlight. The Streamlight is a little bit better at farther distances, but this one has a wider spill, so you can actually see what you're looking at instead of looking at a dot. Again, here is this flashlight. You can see there's 100 yards all the way down there. This one lights up pretty much the entire way, all the way out to 100 yards, and you can still see details. Again, with Gen 1 nods. With this, there we go, that's a little bit better. So you can see this lights up a bigger path. And if you want to see what it does up close, you can see that beam is much larger up close. See down there again, 100 yards. See what it does up in the trees.
So now that you've seen that, should you buy this light? I would say 100% absolutely. Now, what you will use it for will differ based on your applications. It really depends on what you need. So if your needs are you need a very small light that's white and IR, then you probably just fork out the money and buy not this model, but a Surefire, the Vampire, the M600V. This one works okay for what it is, which I plan on actually buying a real Surefire at some point. This is a combination light. But if you're trying to save money, this is a very, very, very good option. Or if you're just looking for, say, something for your hunting rifle or for your, you know, if you go hog hunting or something like that at night, or you just want a handheld IR light for, you know, pushing out further distances to identify things, because, you know, either the illuminator on your, say, your PEC 15 or your Holosun, the combination, if it's not bright enough, doesn't have enough juice, this thing will output and probably outperform at least the civilian versions of those. But just know it's going to, you know, obviously bulk and weight. But again, the nice thing about this is it doesn't take up a lot of space. It's not that much bigger. Say, you know, something like this Inforce. They're very comparable size-wise. Obviously, the bezel, whatever it's called, is larger. So just know that. But compared to something like this, I mean, this thing is just massive. So good job to Cyansky. And again, they sent this out to me, so doesn't influence what I say. I was just genuinely very, very impressed with this thing. They include all the tools up there, as you can see, to attach everything. But if you guys have any questions, comment down below. Give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you appreciate this kind of content. We appreciate y'all watching. Subscribe to the Instagram account if you haven't already. We do have one of those. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you appreciate this kind of work. Again, I try to look for options that are cheap and affordable to give you some capability. And with cheaper equipment, you're never going to get the same capability or performance as you would with more expensive things. But again, this thing works amazingly, especially for, you know, the $80-ish that it goes for. And compared to all these other options out here, I mean, it outperformed every single one of them. The Inforce, this thing, it just gives you flood, which is less than ideal. This thing's only good out to, you know, maybe 50, 75 yards at the most. Same with this thing, except it has a dead spot in the middle, which is obnoxious. This thing's not even worth buying, honestly. This one at the time was probably the best choice, but this guy outperforms us all of them. I was very, very impressed with this, and in case you can't tell. But anyways, hope you all have a good one.